The TrekWorks YouTube channel is sponsored by HDA ModelWorks, suppliers of scale lighting products, detail accessory parts, and complete model kits. Visit HDAModelWorks.com today. Well, hello there everybody, Boyd here with you, and welcome to part 1 of my California Kid 34 Ford Coupe build series here on my YouTube channel. This is what I've got in front of me, guys. I've got 2 kits that I bought to build this. I started off with the idea of starting with this car right here, which is the Revell 34 Ford 3-window coupe in 1/125th scale. Since that's pretty close already to the the way the car looked in the movie, it's missing a few details. The flames were obviously not usable. They're really kind of cartoon looking, and I just, didn't really want to use those. It already has the chopped top though, and that was a good thing. It has the wrong wheels. It's missing the front bumper and a few other things, the side pipes. But I was going to make all that up, scratch building and all that other stuff and modifying a little bit. I bought this second kit here, which is the Revell 29 Ford. This is a actual 1/24 scale. So it's a little bit bigger, but all I was going to use out of that kit were the wheels and tires, because you see we have the nice Steelies with the original Ford dog dish hubcaps, and that was what was on this car over here in the movie that I'm talking about. So we had that all figured out. Well, I went and did all the work, took the body, worked on it, worked on the fenders. It needed a lot of work. It had a lot of flash, a lot of cleanup. You have to glue the top down onto the body, and then there's a big seam all the way around that I had to fill in with putty, and I got all that work done. I was going to show you guys how far I'd gotten, and that's when disaster struck. And sometimes that happens when you're kind of doing a kind of off the wall project like this. I had picked up this set of decals off of eBay a couple weeks ago. They were marked on the listing as for 1/25th scale, so they were going to be perfect for this car right here. And these are a really nice set of the original California Kid flames that are supposed to go on the car, complete with the the California Kid lettering that goes on the door there and everything. So we were all set for that. And these are really rare. They hardly ever pop up. There's a lot of copies that come up, and they're not as complete as this set. They're not nearly as high quality. They were done by this fella here, Fred Cady, quite a few years ago. So I was really excited when they popped up, so I went ahead and grabbed them. Got them here. Thought, great, now I can finally build my one of my favorite movie cars. Well, it turns out after I got all that body work done and everything was looking really good, I started getting to the part where I was going to start doing some decals, and I wanted to start off on the hood. So cut out the first decal, laid it on there, and realized instantly that the decals were way too big for the car. So I immediately figured out that these are actually for a 1/24 scale kit, which really puts the kibosh on using them on this. Even if I tried to trim them down, the flame edges are really intricate and everything, much more detailed and better than what you see on this. So I was pretty much shot right there. Well, come to realize, and a couple people actually suggested on my Facebook posting about this project that I use the ZZ Top car instead, which is actually a 34 Ford, but or a 33, I'm sorry, but they're pretty much exactly the same. The only difference that I could really find in between the two cars is the 34 has an extra kind of a crown up here on the top of the the grill that kind of comes back onto the hood a little bit, and that might be because it's they used an original grill in this car, where on the ZZ Top car it might be a custom grill, and that might be the difference. I could be wrong on that, but otherwise the headlights, the shape of the body, the fenders, we have the chopped top on the ZZ Top car. So lucky enough for me, guys, I had one of these sitting on my shelf. I'd actually started it a while back, and just kind of put it off to the side. I was going to show that down the road here on the channel, and turns out that this is actually a 1/24th kit, and the body is definitely bigger. There's a couple of differences that I kind of wish that I could use from this kit to that, because this kit has a what they call a quick change rear end in it, which was a really cool setup that the original California Kid car did have for the film. The car in the film had a small block Ford engine in it, and I think this kit here has a Chevy engine in it. I'm not totally sure. I'm going to have to check into that a little bit further. But not to worry, I've got a fourth kit, which I'll just kind of give you a glimpse of here, which is just an old parts kit of this 65 Mustang, and it's got a beautiful little small block 289 that is complete. So I'm going to be able to use that engine. I'll probably have to turn the oil pan around on it so the sump is in the right spot. That's why they didn't use a lot of small block Fords in those cars. They were backwards, and the sump on the Chevys in the rear, the one on the Fords in the front, so it wouldn't fit against the cross member. That's why a lot of those old hot rods had small block Chevys in them. So long story short, what we're going to wind up doing here is I'm going to use parts from several different kits. This kit is obviously completely out of the picture now. This kit comes with a straight axle in the rear. I think it's a Ford 9-inch, which kind of funny, the California Kid car is still around, the original film car, but it now does have a 9-inch Ford rear end in it. They took the old quick change out, so I guess we could kind of be correct that way. I'm going to have to scrape up some side pipes, probably scratch make those, come up with some kind of bumper on the front. The car in the movie had like a really weird just piece of metal across the back, like an I-beam almost, like a push bumper on the rear, just painted black. So we'll come up with something on that too. So let me pull these things out of the way here for you guys and show you what's up here. You can see right here that these are the two bodies. Now this is the 1/25th scale. Let me get back down a little bit lower here, and I might be able to zoom in just a tad. Let me try that. Okay, we'll get you a little bit closer. You can see this is the 1/25th scale 34 Ford by Revell, and it, I had it all done and pretty much ready to go. It took a lot of work. I had to sand off the this thing had the rag top detail on the top, so I had to get that off of there. It had louvers all over the back deck here. Had to sand those off, get rid of those. Also on the hood, had to sand those off. So I had everything done. I had this sprayed down with a coat of testers, ready to take decals, and that's when I ran into the problem. So here we go. About 3 or 4 hours later after that, when I figured that out, we have the second body here. This is the ZZ Top Eliminator car, which is the 33. You can see the obvious difference in the size of these two bodies. So yeah, we were right in the ballpark then for our decals. Our decals are going to wind up, lining up perfect. I've actually started working on the hood already and started laying some of those down. We'll show you those in just a little bit. But I started by putting the California Kid thing there on the side. Now these decals are really something else too, because what you've got to do here is, I'm not sure if it was because of old technology when they were printed or what, but you can see that like you get the orange flame that will basically go on the side of the car right here. Well, this is supposed to have like a white pinstripe all the way around each flame. So the pinstripes are separate here. You can see, it probably won't show up, but there's white, exact pattern of this, only just the white, a thin pinstripe. So what you have to do, you have to put this down on the model first, get it all settled down and everything. Then you have to put this over the top of that one and line it up perfectly where these edges just line up exactly on the edges of these flames. And then you see these little yellow markings that are on here, if I can get the light off of it. You have to cut these all out and lay them in here on top of the yellow or the orange here in certain spots to give it that kind of rippling effect. And so that's quite a bit of work. I've already been working on the hood, doing it that way, and I've made pretty good progress on that. I put a coat of clear on it, waiting for it to dry, and then I'm going to wet sand that and hit it once more with the clear. I wound up with a few little ridges on my decals because you're just piling them up. And by the time I put these yellow detail ones on, you're 3 high on your decals. You got the orange first, then you got the white, then you got the other one over the top of that, and wow, you talk about something else. Never quite seen anything like that before, but I was just talking to a good friend of mine, watching one of his videos the other day, Chris Cortell, Classic Plastic 101. He built a fantastic Batmobile, 66 Batmobile, and he just had a video about that where he showed all the work he did to make that particular car. Several different kits were involved, a lot of scratch building, and I commented on his video, if a guy wants something bad enough, you'll make it happen. So I'm kind of in the same boat right now. I didn't anticipate this was going to be quite this much. Thought we were going to just need 2 kits, but now we're into 4 kits, and a completely redo on the body, which this took 3 hours. I had to do the same thing on this one. It didn't have the louvers or the rag top, so I saved a little bit of work there. But I had to put the top on it, had to fix that. There's a really nasty seam that goes all the way around on this kit, because I think they make it optional where you can build it as a roadster or something. So I got all that done and I got back to where I started. I got the fenders laying over there in the corner. I'm painting those right now. So I'm going to get you caught up now. I'm going to pick up where I left off. I'm going to go over and take you to the spray booth, and I'm going to show you. I've still got to paint the fenders and everything, so I'm going to show you. I'm using craft acrylic paints for this, and I'm going to show you how I mix it, how I reduce it, and how I spray it. And we'll be back with that in just a second. I'll get up and be right back. Okay, so I've got everything moved over to the paint area now, and we're getting ready to mix up some paint. I'm using this Folk Art acrylic craft paint, and this is their pure black, and just straight out of the bottle. I'm just going to put a little bit in my cup here, and we're going to just put some straight water in with it. Don't want to make too much paint, but we'll make enough to paint our fenders here. I just got regular tap water in my pump spray bottle. I'm just going to put a little bit to start with, and then I've got my little Super Mixer 3000 here. I'm going to go ahead and mix this up. This craft paint likes to foam up a little bit when you mix it with this thing. So after you do this, you want to let it settle down just a little bit. And that should be good. Now I'm going to use this just regular handle on my paintbrush here. I'm going to dip it in this stuff. And I'm just, right now what I'm checking for is the thickness of it, you know. And I want it to be the consistency of milk, basically. You know, thicker than water, but not, you know, too thick. And I got a little bit of ways to go here, so a little bit more water needs to go in. And this is really, you can think of this as like concentrated paint. So a little bit of it will go a long ways. Okay, I'm getting a little bit closer now. Take one more couple of squirts. I don't want this too thin where it's going to not cover very well, and it's not going to, you know, it's going to run. So you just kind of, with your own individual airbrush, you'll have to kind of play around and see what you want to come up with for your mixture. Now you can use Windex with this too. Windex is great. It'll actually help it dry a little bit faster because it's got a little bit of alcohol in it. But I force dry this stuff with my little heat gun here. I'll show you how I'm going to do that in a second. You can use a hair dryer, but it's okay on dark colors. On light colors, I've noticed that it'll stain it a little bit. Like if you're going to use a white or something, you put a little bit of that in there, and it turns it a little bit blue. So you gotta think about that. It has that blue dye in it. But darker colors you probably won't notice. So I think we're getting pretty close. Maybe just a little bit more. I'm never thin enough to start with because it's easy to go too far. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I like that. Now, a really important step if you're going to use this craft paint is, even if this stuff is brand new in the bottle, this bottle's been sitting on my bench for, you know, up on my shelf for probably a month or two. But even a brand new bottle, a lot of people complain about trying to spray with this stuff, and even though they thin it and everything, their brush keeps clogging up. Well, this stuff has like micro chunks in it. It's just little hard pieces of the pigment or whatever they use to make the paint. And so a really critical step is you have to strain it. And I strain all paints, whether it's, you know, automotive paint or this stuff or whatever I'm using. I even strain my clear coat when I spray it if I'm not spraying it out of a can. Like I'm going to use the 2K clear on the final paint job here. I even strain that brand new out of the, you know, out of the can too, because it'll have little particles in it. So especially if it's been sitting for any amount of time. So you want to make sure you do that. That's a really important step you can do to avoid getting debris and stuff in your paint and having your gun clog up. So this is 190 micron. That's pretty fine. You can get these at any Home Depot or your automotive paint supply store. I buy it by the sleeves, get a whole bunch of it. So I just use these all the time. And I can also tell when I'm pouring my paint through this how well it goes in there and how well it goes through the screen, whether I'm getting pretty close to being, you know, thin enough. If it's too thick, it'll just take forever for it to drain out of there. And it's flowing through there pretty good, so I know I'm looking pretty much in the neighborhood here. So I'll just kind of tip it around a little bit and let it settle out. And the only thing that stayed in there was a whole bunch of really thick stuff. Okay, and probably chunks of stuff and everything else. So you want to take and throw away this cup right away too, the old cup, so you don't accidentally mix them up and go back to the bad stuff. So we've got all that done. We're going to move this stuff out of the way. Pull in our fenders that we're going to paint here. Let me make sure, I'm going to bump the camera up a little higher here. We're going to paint this fender here. Now, I had to do a little bit of work to this. This is the Eliminator kit, ZZ Top car. On the back of the fenders here, it had two little rectangle holes cut in them for the taillights to go there. On our California Kid car, they moved the taillights to the rear pan, just outside of the license plate, spot. So I had to fill those in. Now what I use for that is a little bit of this, I'll grab it real quick and show it to you. It works really good. Instead of using putty, I use this Solarez UV curing resin. It's a perfectly clear, kind of a thick compound. So I just squirted a little bit of that in there, let it settle and kind of self-level. Then you hit it with your UV light here, and it cures in a matter of seconds. And it's really nice because it dries super hard, but if you go to sand it feather edges really good. So if you know bodywork, you know what I mean. When you're sanding something, the edges of it will blend in to the background. And I started off with some 180 and just kind of focused on the little spots right there. And then once I got the edges kind of smoothed out, I dropped down to 600 and just finished sanded it out. Then a couple of coats of primer, another 600 sanding over the top of that, and it's all set and ready to go. Now another little byproduct of the UV light here is, if you ever wonder how much dust is going to be on your model before you're going to put your paint on it, you can shine this on here, guys. Like, I don't know if, let me see if the camera will, let me try to zoom in a little bit here for you here. I'd really like you guys to see this. Just a kind of a neat little side effect that I figured out with this thing. If you look, hopefully you guys can see that. Maybe if I turn it the right way. But in person here, it's showing every little speck of dust or piece of dust that's sitting on there. Maybe you can see that on the front fender there. If I get it just right. You can see those little spots right there. Those are all specks of dust. So if you really want to be picky, guys, you can go over that with this thing and see all that and make sure you get rid of it all before you go ahead and lay down your paint. So it's just on there really loose, just sitting on there. So I'm going to take my little shop air here and just kind of dust over it, see if I can knock it off of there. If I drag a tack rag over it, I might put more dust back on it too. So I'm just kind of do it like that and give her a good little shot. I'm going to check it out again and see what we got. I see two more still on the top of that fender there. They must be kind of stubborn, so I'm going to take the tack rag and wipe over that. See if I can make those go away. I'm going to go ahead and do the whole thing, why not? Sometimes they're stubborn and they won't come off. They're kind of hooked into the paint a little bit. Probably happened when I primed it. But a little preparation, a little extra effort, you can make things go away. I see one right here. Amazing how much is still on there. I'm going to go ahead and use the air while I've got my flashlight on and see if I can push this stuff off of there. Oh, no, you can just see it popping right on there. Okay, I think I've got most of it. Let's try one more little wipe off. Spots where I can still see it hanging on there. Looks like we cleared it off of the back. Two little guys right there. Yeah, they just keep jumping up all over. They're probably microscopic. Some of them are. You'll never see them in the paint, but it looks pretty clean to me right now, so I'm going to spray while I got a chance here. Let me back up now for you a little bit. Turn our light back on. Now I'm going to go ahead and load my mixed up paint right into my little, I'm using the Iwata Neo. I like this little brush because it's a nice general purpose airbrush. I've got a Eclipse that's made for more fine detail painting, like painting little shading and, you know, weathering and stuff like that. This is a general purpose, you know, dual action, but it'll cover a large area. It's got a big needle, so it'll move this thicker craft paint really well too. So here we go, guys. I'm gonna need some air. Fire up my compressor. We'll just dust this down. Now I'm gonna put really light coats on this. I'm not gonna try to make, you know, that's a mistake that a lot of painters make, or people that are learning how to paint, is that you think that your first couple of, you know, your first application should be your beauty shot, you know, where it's covering everything, and, you know, you got a beautiful shine and all that. Well, that's when you're going to have problems, because you can get a run, you know, you can get, if you got any dirt in it, it's going to show up, you know, right away. Stuff has a chance to stick to it. So just a little dusting like that. Just barely missed it on there. I'm spraying at about 25 psi out of that brush. So now I've got my heat gun. Now you guys can use a hair dryer for this. A hair dryer is actually probably better, especially for people that are just learning how to do this. You won't put out as much heat. You won't have as much chance of melting any of the plastic or anything. I've been using this for so long that I'm just totally used to it. So I know the distance. I've got it on low. The trick is to stay far away and keep moving. Okay, now what this has done is this has like instantly dried this paint. This little bit of paint that's on here is already completely dry. So now we're safe to, you know, try another coat. Come back at it again. The other thing I was going to mention, if you put your paint on there light like this, less chance you're going to have of a reaction with primer or whatever. Now this water-based paint, I haven't found where it'll react with anything. I've tried it over all kinds of primers now. I've sealed it with all kinds of clear coats. I use an automotive clear. I use testers. I've used, you know, pretty much everything, and I haven't had anything mess it up. But other types of paint, solvent-based paint, you know, your spray can stuff, your other kinds of paints that are out there, you can you need to go really light on that, because that paint actually is what we call hot, you know, so it can attack the paint that's underneath of it, or whether it's primer or whatever. And if you're going to get some kind of a reaction, that's when it's going to happen, if you put it on there really thick and really wet right off the start. So if you just, you know, mist a little coat on there and let it dry, it has a chance to settle down and form a base, so that when you're adding more, it's working with its own stuff and it's not, you know, conflicting with anything. Just kind of think about it that way. And if you do that, you'll have a lot better results and a lot less chance of bad stuff happening, as often does with paint. So you can be, you know, you can do an awesome job building your model, and in the end, if you skip some things on your paint job or whatever, it can ruin the whole thing. I think we might be getting low on paint. Nope, we're still good. Let my compressor catch up a little bit. So now I'm just going a little bit more, you know, a little bit, getting a little bit more, pulling back on the trigger just a tiny little bit more, and just getting a nice even coating on it. I'm trying to make sure I get, you know, you got to especially look on the sides. Use your light, get right down there and look at it, because, you know, from a few inches away it can look like it's covered, but then you get up really close and you see a bald spot. So we all get bald spots when we get older. Okay, let's go inside the fenders a little bit. I'm going to paint the bottom, you know, in a separate step. Once I get this all done on the top, I'll flip it over and dust over the bottom. The bottom doesn't have to look as pretty, but we'll try to do a good job on it. So it's settling down really nice. I'm not seeing any kind of dirt or anything in the paint. Now I'm going to completely paint on the bottom, because I want to make sure that all the edges are covered up around the inside of the fender wells and everything. Getting there. Alright, I'm happy with that. I'll give it another shot with a heat gun. Let's take it easy. Keep moving it. These are some real thin, you know, parts that if I'm overly aggressive with this thing, you know, just watch that fender just melt right down. But like I said, I've gotten really used to this. You won't have near as much of a chance of that happening with a hairdryer. And a hairdryer, I've said this before, a hairdryer is actually probably better because it's got a more powerful fan in it too. It'll push more air than I'm pushing here, and that'll help it dry too, with the air, you know, just besides the heat. So always, if you're going to do with fresh paint like this, if you're going to use your heat gun or, you know, a hair dryer, always turn it on and like maybe tap on it a little bit and let it run for a few seconds, pointing out into nowhere. So in case it had a little dust in it or something, you know, you don't point it right at this and blow a bunch of it right onto your fresh paint. These are all things I've learned the hard way, guys, that I'm trying to pass on to you to save you a little bit of trouble. Okay, so I'm real happy with that. It's settled down really good. It's covered really good. As I said, I'm going to flip it over and actually do a little bit better job on the bottom. You guys don't need to see that. So that's settled down. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit this with some of this basic Testors lacquer, and that's going to be my base. As I mentioned, when you're using this craft paint, and you know, in the end, if you're going to use decals or not, I recommend sealing it with some type of a clear, because this paint, the one thing that I will say about it is it's a little bit on the soft side. You know, you can scratch it or chip it a little bit easier than regular acrylics. It is an acrylic, but it's not quite as strong as a solvent-based acrylic. That's the knock on water-based paint. So sealing it with a good clear coat will kind of help make a nice little hard shell on that, protect it a little bit better, and it'll keep it from fading or anything like that. And the other big thing is if you're going to apply decals, which I'm going to be doing here a lot up on the front fenders, the flames and everything, you have to seal it first with some kind of a clear, because since it's a water-based paint, if you put water on here to put your decals down, it's going to stain the heck out of it, and it's going to leave little, even if it doesn't stain the color, it'll leave little marks in it too, like etch it almost. So you have to be really careful. You know, I'm just going to go ahead right now. I know there's no dust or anything on it, and just put a light coat of this clear over that. And this is not, you know, for a pretty coat either. I'm just dusting it over it to seal it. That's all I'm doing, so that it's, you know, it's sealed when we do the decals. Doesn't have to be super smooth or glassy looking, just a nice mist coat. Just make sure you cover the whole thing, especially the areas you're going to do decal work. And that's it. And then having that on there nice and thin like that too will help it dry a lot faster. You know, this is lacquer based. This stuff, and usually a thin coat like that in usually 15-20 minutes, it's dry enough where you can start you know, putting decals down and everything. So now we got our sealer on there. I'll let this dry. I'll come back and I'll dust over the bottom of it with some black, and then it'll be ready to go. We'll come back and I'll show you some decal work going down on the front fenders, and that'll be a wrap for this video. Be right back. Hey everybody, back with you here for the wrap of the video. Well, you can see in the shot here, I went a little bit farther than getting just the fenders done. Got into a groove with these decals. They're such a pain in the butt. So I decided to get the paint over with all in one shot, and I just kept right on going. And got them done. About 4 or 5 hours is what it took, off and on. As I mentioned, you got to put down the decals, you know, one layer at a time. You got to put the orange and then the white outline and then the little yellow, you know, details there to get that ripple effect here at random. And so I had to use Solvaset to get all the decals down, especially around the curves of the fenders and all that. So that made them wrinkly. I had to let those settle down and then make sure they were totally dry, because I didn't want to put the other decal over top of it when it was still wet with Solvaset, because it would grab it right away and it would be a catastrophe. So I waited a good long shot in between each one. Crossed my fingers when I did the white over the top, especially on the fenders, because I thought there was no way they're going to line up after all that shrinkage and wrinkling and everything. But man, I'll tell you, when they settled all down, they're not bad at all. I'm really happy with them. They're just a, you know, couple little teeny spots here and there where they're off just a hair, but it's really hard to see. And I'll just chalk that up to the way the car was painted originally. You know, a guy just did a quick flame job on it. It was a hot rod. And so it came out pretty good. So after I got all that done, I decided to go ahead and seal everything. Right now I've got one coat of Automotive 2K clear on it. Let me show you the other side here before I forget. Got the California Kid name on there and everything. So all the decal work is pretty much done. That's the real hard part about this model. I'm really happy. I think the rest is going to be pretty much downhill. The body seems to be fitting really good. Here you can see I've got my wheels and tires done. These are the wheels and tires out of the 29 Ford Revell kit that I showed you, the Roadster. These are the dog dish wheels with the steelies and the trim rings that this car had on it, so that's going to look really great. I think I got the wheel, or the tire offset looking really good. She had a real tall tire in the back and a real tiny one up front, just like they used to in the old days. There's the rear pan all painted up real nice and cleared. Here's my scratch-built side pipes, or kit bash side pipes, I guess you want to call it. The red part there is off of the 66 Malibu Street Rat, 124 scale Chevelle. The curb part's just some heated and bent sprue. These didn't have to be fancy at all. They were just exactly the way they appeared right here. Once I get them painted, they're going to look exactly right, and the length of them is perfect. The curved part's going to kind of dump, kind of drop down from behind the front fender here and stay just on the edge of the running board, come back, and it has a slightly down turn dump just ahead of the rear tire, kind of tucked in under the fender. You can kind of see them. They stick out on the sides a little bit, and they had them painted like, I think, kind of a silver. They weren't actually chrome, they were just kind of a silver, but the center part was painted black for the same length as the running board, so they were kind of, tried to hide them or something. But in the film, they weren't even hooked up. You could look in the side of the fender here and just see them, kind of where the tubes ended right there. He was driving around town with open headers and stuff. And it sounds like it in the movie, too. It sounds great. So I'm going to leave that little detail there. I don't have to worry about hooking up the exhaust for once. That'll actually save a little time. So that's going to be a wrap for this one, everybody. This one's running kind of long already. Hope you enjoyed everything we've got going so far. Part 2 will come back, and I'll be working on the the frame and the suspension and everything. I've got the engine. We're going to use that little 289 Cobra engine out of the 66 Mustang. So that'll be great. That'll be perfect for this. I don't even really care if that's, I know it had a small block Ford, but probably wasn't a Cobra motor, but I think a Cobra motor will be cool in this thing. We don't have to do everything exactly right. It's a model. It's our own model. We're going to have fun with it. I just wanted to give it a basic look of the California Kid. I've got to still figure out some kind of a bumper for the front and the rear. The rear shouldn't be any problem. It's just a piece of straight, like almost angle iron. It was like almost a push bar kind of thing, just painted black. The front one is a little tricky. I haven't decided what I'm going to make that. I'm going to maybe take some chrome sprue and try and stretch it and shape it, and then it's got the little bumperettes that go on there too. Everything else, I think we're set. I think the interior is going to be pretty basic. As I said, I got the wheels here. I think we're ready to go with the rest of it, the glass and everything. We got the chrome that's the correct thing for the car. The taillights, we got the correct taillights for it out of the Eliminator kit here. So the headlights look pretty good. Grill looks pretty good. We'll be back with all that in the next one, guys. I've been talking too long here. We'll see you in the next update, and thanks for watching, and thanks for subscribing, everybody. We really appreciate it. See you next time, and happy modeling, everybody.